shuffling it through. Fair enough, there you were.
Call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Ms. Muckout,
Here.
Mr. Olson,
Here.
Mr. Walker.
Here.
Mr. Erkins.
Here.
Mr. Rastigar.
Are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Seeing none. Well, Tim had surgery this morning. He just texted that he's still under anesthesia. So not feeling coherent enough to join the meeting. So hopefully he heals quickly and recovers well.
Is that Tim?
Tim, yeah, had surgery this morning. Kind of, he let me know he wasn't sure if he's gonna be able to make it or not. And
And you gave him
I mean, hey,
Yeah.
you know, anesthesia, it's that's no joke. So
never gave me a.
Could have been a funny meeting.
as I said, it could be entertaining. However, I get it. All right, on to the minutes. Did we have a slight change?
I was able to correct them
Okay.
and we were able to correct it without reprinting.
Oh, okay. And it's just a Mr., Mrs. to a Mr.
No, it was a communications and marketing update. I know a lot about a lot, but I think
So it
about
should have been finance?
communications and marketing.
Okay. Are we still okay?
It's who gave the update. I think he's saying his name is next to it, is what I'm assuming.
Yeah. Yeah, under other business, C, Finance Committee draft
That
budget
needs to be
review.
changed.
Right, so just interlineate it,
Okay.
explain what the change, or Judy can explain what the change is.
I can explain.
Okay.
The marketing update was given by Mary Michael and Cliff Klinger, not Jody Olson.
And it's under the budget, so it would be Mr. Olson, and I don't know, did Stephanie participate in the update on the Finance Committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Got it.
With
Yeah.
such amendments, I'd move approval.
All those in favor of approving as mentioned?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Do you want me to sign these now, or do you want me to cross it out? How do you want me to do this? Cross it out, sign it?
I always find.
Okay.
As long as they eventually are signed and they're eventually, but you just approved. It's okay.
On to the monthly activity and finance report, Stephanie and Cody.
Madam Chair, directors of the board, thank you for the time today. Got some exciting stuff to report. It's been a busy couple past months for us, but also this month and then last month, so it's kind of fun to share some of what we've got going on. Just starting with some September highlights, we've had an outstanding September. We had the Boise Metro Chamber Gala hosted here, Dress for Success Annual Gala, so that's that picture in the middle. And then on the far right, we had a sponsorship with the Leadership Boise Golf Tournament. So our sales team did a great job of kind of going out and representing Boise Center, trying to pick up additional business, whether it's holiday parties or into next year for 2025. And then we had a team of golfers that played in that tournament too. We've got a couple Leadership Boise graduates, so we're supportive of that organization and program. Some miscellaneous updates, just again, such a busy month for September. I've got some fun stuff. It was a record revenue month. I'll get to that here shortly. But operations set 25,047 chairs in September. They touched every chair twice, so it's actually 50,000 chairs if you take it from setting it to tearing it down. IT closed a record 33 tickets in the month of September. And we were working on our health and liability and insurance renewal. It's that time of the year, so we got those into the budgets. We spent a lot of time making sure that we could get best deal we can, and then reducing rates where we can and when we can. On the event side, we did 21 total events in September, 5 of those being conventions, making up $800,000 of the revenue, 3,300 room nights, and a $3.4 million economic impact. So a great month overall for the economic impact, but also for the revenues and for the conventions. We had 16 non-conventions making up $470,000 in revenue and a $1.5 million economic impact. So having a $4.9 million economic impact, when we do $42 million a year in 1 month, shows the kind of month that September was. Food and beverage did $815,000 in just revenue alone in September. And then on the sales side, we had Jennifer McMaster, who's our contract administrator, attend Momentous, which is the software that we track all of our bookings in and our sales team does all their leads in. It's pretty much what we do finance in. It's the entire ERP for the Boise Center. And that was a great conference. We also had Paneet, who's in the room today, attend that conference. And so we've had two people be able to take advantage of that continued education opportunity. We hosted Pacific Northwest Clean Water Association, and they've confirmed for 2027 again, which is a great piece of business, as well as 2030. They have about 830 room nights, 150,000 in revenue, and about nearly 490,000 in economic impact. So we were extremely happy to get that one back. And we did host them as well just recently.
Is September or October typically your largest month?
It depends. Last October was our biggest, highest revenue generating month on record. September just beat it. So we'll get into that. And I remember saying to the board last month, I have an anticipation that orange line is going to jump way up above those other two lines there. Well, as you can see, it did jump above the other two lines. The revenues for September alone was a $1.27 million month. That is a record in the history of Boise Center for any month, period. So it actually surpassed last October. Now, what I will say, the forecast for for the October that we're in right now is going to beat that number. Just in forecast alone, we're sitting at 1.3 million for October. We usually outperform forecast by about 15 to 20%. So it could be a 1.4 to a $1.5 million month in October, which would be incredible. So again, really strong on the revenue side. We're sitting at 9.3 million for the year.
Chase has a question.
Yes, sir.
Question. So revenue, but how are we doing on margin with that? Because cost of everything has gone up too. Does it track? or
It does
what's that?
track, and I'll show, I've got that slide coming up with our gross profit margins on a different slide, and I'll talk to that. But yes, so the goal is 15, the last month alone, the gross profit margins, when we do a September, that's a record. We had 35% gross margins on the month. Now that really drives it, and what I'll speak to is the volatility we see. So I'm looking at August there and the month prior, and you see it really low. That month was a 10% gross profit margin. So we got to carry the staff to be ready for the fourth quarter. That's what ends up having those margins get really volatile when you have that much back and forth happening. So to your point, right here, so current gross profit margin sitting at 18.9%, almost at 19% on the year. That has helped by this strong fourth quarter, a 35% in 1 month. I got some stuff in the budget to talk about gross profits, and I know that you'd asked in the finance committee meeting, hey, where does it come from? This graph shows you where it was coming from prior when we first opened East and how it's come down. Some of that I'll speak to in the budget of where we've kind of moved either repairs and maintenance, capital. I've got about 4 or 5 things that really impact those numbers from the prior years and the way that we do the accounting on that. Again, the goal for 15% is looking really strong. I anticipate October to be really good. November will be an interesting one because we're going to actualize a lot of the revenues in that in December from Festival of Trees. Festival of Trees actually will hit twice in the same fiscal year in 2025, but it won't hit in 24. So that's just something to pay attention to as we get into November. Room revenues. So from the STR report side of things, September, I've added in this. So when you guys got sent last week, the report, it didn't include the numbers because they usually come in after the 18th. So I did put them in on Monday of this week. We got this out. It'll be the one that's posted out online, but it does include now September's STR hotel numbers and occupancies. With that, again, we're continuing to see record September on the books here from the lodging revenue side. Continuing to outperform that. I didn't update this, so I apologize, but actual, it's a $21 million revenue month from August. I put these in last minute on Monday, realizing I didn't change the number here at the top.
So
So
those are just in the district.
what's that?
Just in the district?
This is group 1, which is as close to the district. It's not a perfect boundary within the STR report, but they've tried to calculate off of the district boundaries, but not perfect. Again, same situation on the district. We're seeing this number here continuing to be a pace. This is the lodging room demand. What I noted last year or last month was that September was a record demand on that side. We're continuing to see it was a little bit down for September, so it wasn't much, but it was a very much almost a leveling off on the hotel demand. But September was up there for September itself as a month. What that comes down to is this is your ADRs. Occupancy on the top here, or sorry, ADR on the top here is you're seeing that orange line is 2024, and then 2023 is that green line. So we're starting to see for the last maybe 4 or 5 months a separation. It was almost parallel for the first 6 months of the year, and then we started to see a little bit of separating happen. Some of that's just a mix of different activities that are happening from conventions along with events happening locally. So again, these numbers are interesting to pay attention to. From the occupancy side down here, occupancy was down a little bit, but ADRs were up. So it shows you September, kind of that mix of what's happening from the hotel side. It doesn't always follow the trend, but it does stay in line as you look at the year, you kind of back out and look at it from a further perspective.
And you've been continuing to meet with the hoteliers on a regular basis, right? And kind of
Just last week, we actually met with all the downtown hoteliers with myself, Carrie, Ali, Andrew Height, and got kind of ahead of the conversation about what we're seeing and just kind of getting ahead of what we might be able to do to make more inroads for either more group blocks or more rooms for those group blocks from those hotels to potentially win what we're calling kind of that prime lead, which is the business that we really, really want. It has a great economic impact. Everybody wins when we get that type of business. Now, naturally, we'd like all the small stuff too, as we can get it, but really we don't want to see us lose out a great piece of business or convention business or city business just because we're 20, 30, 40 rooms short. And so that's really what those meetings with the hoteliers is helping, making sure we're having a closer conversation and staying in contact with what our expectations are from each other, and then picking up a phone and calling when we're kind of just short.
and then vice versa from that too on,
Exactly.
on, you know, because you're kind of seeing that.
What I did here was, and Adam Altwee's on the call with Init 500, there was a lot of support for the convention center on the call and what we do. So I thought it was a really good amicable conversation as a whole, with everybody understanding how we can all kind of work together to win together. So this is more of an annual, like I say, when you step back and take a look at what it does from an annual perspective, this is the forecast for what 2024 will finish at. I've got some budget stuff for 2025, and then I'll present that into the budget as well. This is the future booked business from the sales team side. So here on the left side, you're looking at the future booked economic impact. That front column there and the teal column there in the front is their current month and what they've booked future years, not just into next year, but all future years. So it's a way for us to kind of take a look at how the sales team is pacing. And you can kind of see that the year to date prior is the purple bar, and then the year to date. So we're just a little slightly behind from the year to date prior and the total numbers there, but very much pacing on with that goal. And then future booked revenue, similar story there, where again, they did 742,000 just in future booked revenue within the last month. And now you're looking at that, they're actually a little bit ahead on the future booked revenue year to date. So pacing well for that goal as well. Future booked room nights, similar story. All these kind of tend to correlate. Current month, they've booked 3,764 rooms. We're almost like dead even from year to date prior and year to date on numbers for future room nights booked. Under the event attendance, again, this is something that we don't get to control, so we just report on it for the most part, but I can kind of speak to when we see big variances in it. June had a library event that I spoke about. It was a public event where it allowed the public to come in, open to the public for that. So if you look at June's attendance numbers, that orange bar there is a big jump. That was a new event, but for the most part, March, obviously you got Flower and Garden Show, so you can kind of look and see what's driving these attendances is the type of show, whether it's a public show, it's free, it's charging for it. That tends to move the needle on what we see from an attendance side, but currently doing well there. September attendance was 10,395. Even with it being a record revenue year, it wasn't our record attendance. So attendance is one portion of it, but not the only part of it. Economic impact, we are at 97% of our year-to-date goal. September's economic impact was incredible. As you can see here, we did about almost $5 million in economic impact, and I spoke about those numbers on that prior slide. We're right in the pace to beat this goal, and so we'll want to look at this as we work on goals for next year. We're anticipating a 40 million because we are seeing a little leveling off, and I'll get to that in the budget. But I think with what I'm seeing actualized in this, I'd be comfortable maybe moving that up a little bit beyond the 40. So. Guest satisfaction scores. This is our overall guest experience score. So when they kind of step back from the whole, how was their experience here at Boise Center, we're continuing to do really great things. That same weighted average is 4.92. It's been basically that. We've had 1 3 rating all year long, 5 4s, and then 82 5s, which is outstanding because I know how I fill out surveys and I'm usually motivated when I'm upset with something. So the fact that we're getting that much good response, and then the response rate through events through September is sitting at 39.4, which is up 2.9% from the prior month. So we got a little bit more response rate. And that just has, I think, to do with the types of events and the clients that we had at that time. Just again, the slide that kind of talks about challenges and strategy. A lot of this we'll get into here a little bit later, but we've lost a couple large conventions for 2025. So it's something that's impacting the revenues. One of those is Western Power Sports. The second one I want to say is Cradle Point or Clearwater. Which one am I? Cradle Point? Yep. So two big, large, six-figure revenue conventions, nothing that anything other than different ownership, different leadership, and they're trying out different locations. So having the event in the backyard was a great advantage for us to be able to work with both of those organizations, but both of them have looked at opportunities outside of Boise for future years.
So they had stuff on the books.
They were holding some dates. You want to?
Yes, and you know what, I'm backpedaling. Are you talking about the conventions that were contracted that ended up having to cancel?
Yes.
So those two were Northrop Grumman and for April next year and Northwest Lineman College
Oh,
for
yes.
January of next year. The Western Power Sports and Cradle Point weren't yet contracted, although we've been trying to work with them to confirm so those are separate, sorry.
Yes, you're right. Sorry. It was those two events that were contracted that we had to keep deposits. They looked at future years booking. But then two others that have been here multiple years they've come here are two events that we kind of anticipated would be coming back that we're kind of seeing go elsewhere. So
So it's not that they canceled it completely, they canceled it to go somewhere else.
we're tracking that lost business and the reasons why, but it doesn't have anything other than to do with what they're looking for.
Just
We see
leadership.
they're looking for different time of year, wanting to be somewhere a little bit warmer, that kind of stuff, so. Large event volume in September, wore the team out, and again, the way that we do this and handle it, we do culture, all hands, and a lot of things. I just tell you, it was really cool to watch the team, and it still is. This month has been very similar, where you get directors and managers out there arm in arm with the team servicing the events, especially during the day right now. We have a lot of students on the part-time on-call basis. So when the students are in school, some of the big lunches or breakfasts is when I see all hands tend to come on. We get people from all different departments, and it's cool to watch that happen from a culture standpoint. We did post an RFQ for the parking lot, and I received no responses, which was interesting. I got some questions about it as it was posted. I think it's the size of project that it is, and knowing where certain people are as far as some of the general contractors or the construction managers. So it's a small enough piece of business that I think that they were like, well, we'll wait and see what others bid on it. I got a couple inquiries about it as it was posted, but I never got an actual RFQ posted or anybody responded to it. What that allows us to do, and I'll let Tom speak to this when he gets on his portion, we can pursue options via the open market. My recommendation would be to get 3 bids and go with the lowest possible bid for that. RFQ is done a little different than an RFP, and I'll let Tom speak to that. Qualifications versus pricing is what I was looking for, was somebody that could manage the contract for us. What that does is it alleviates a lot of the work and risk on our end, but we pay a little bit more for that. And again, I'll let Tom speak to some of this as he gets into that on his presentation.
So you want questions about that later or now?
What's that?
You want questions now?
Either one. I'm good with now is fine.
So if.
Madam Chair.
Yeah,
Sorry,
no, go ahead.
time frame.
Give me a time frame.
Well, I assume we're gonna pave the parking lot. Is it
It's
gonna
in-
happen before I retire?
It's up to the board to approve it. I do have the money in the budget to do that. If we would like, if we approve the budget as is, it does have that money. Now, that doesn't mean that we need to approve the parking lot or doing it. We would have the ability to go down that road if we choose to at this point in time. So it's up to the board to have a discussion and decision on that. So
Let me ask it a different way. When do you plan to have a parking lot?
my goal would be is if we can get it done, would be in the springtime, would be the most advantageous time from a weather standpoint, and when they're not doing a bunch of big, large events. So.
Thank you.
So, and Chase, you mean the RFP process versus RFQ, RFP, so would we need somebody to manage that on our side? I know that we had somebody kind of manage this aquatics facility when it was being built. Is that somebody that you would look to kind of oversee that facility or
Yes.
process? I mean, so RFP, you'd just be getting somebody who pays it, like ABC Paving.
And you get all the bids yourself from all the subs and everything, but in RFQ, you're gonna end up having somebody as a GC or a CM manage that process and go out to bid on your behalf.
Okay, but you could still kind of piecemeal it, right? You could get RFP from a paver and then hire somebody to manage that, or is that, I don't know. I'm good to tell where, Chase, or
No,
no?
I think the way that we'd want to do this is we would want to find a GC or a CM to manage the project on our behalf and go get some quotes from them, 3 bids on the project at this point in time, our recommendation. But I will follow legal counsel's advice on the best way to go forward.
do you think the RFQ was just too cumbersome? And is that why?
I mean, I had some things in there that required proof of 5 years of experience doing it. I don't think that would have limited it, but it could have been, but nobody reached out saying it was so, that the specs were so restrictive that nobody responded, but I'll let Tom jump in here.
Remind me the amount of your estimated amount.
About 450,000.
Yeah, so if you don't get responses to an RFP under the construction manager CMGC statute, then for that dollar value, you need to just have a public bid. You need to post it, you need to advertise it, you need to have your plans and specifications available to potential bidders, and then you need to take the lowest bid. And so that kind of a relationship would be between you and a general contractor. And you would need someone on your side just to deal with the general contractor. I always encourage owners to have an owner's rep that's got some construction background. Not someone has to be a full-time employee or anything like that. Someone that can be your eyes and ears on the construction project. Can be there to attend the meetings and can help deal with the general contractor. Because there's a whole different language that group speaks when it comes to a change order. If you get someone who knows how that process works, can advocate on your behalf, then I think it's money well spent. Usually on an hourly basis, someone you decide how often they're gonna visit the project. They're not managing it, they're not doing it, they're just being the interaction between Cody and the general contractor.
We used one for Pat Walsh for the Aquatic Center was CGA. He was our owner's rep, made sure all the bills were getting paid. If there was any issues with the subs, with the GCs, all of those, that's who handled it and watched it on our behalf.
Madam Chair, does that, do their fees come from that original budget, the 450? Does it have to be?
You can account for them in your budget however you want, but
Okay.
it's, the budget number I'm focusing on is the threshold for when you have to do a hard bid. And if a CMGC is not showing any interest, then you got to switch to a hard bid or a bidding stat, just like a normal bid process. It can't be just three though, Cody. It's
Okay,
gotta
that is
be-
good to know. I thought-
The three is a lower threshold.
Even though we already did the public procurement of the RFQ? Okay, that's good to know.
And so you just need to put it out to bid. Do you have a design professional?
No, currently.
If we could communicate to the contractors exactly what needs to be done, how deep the asphalt's gonna be, how much it has to be torn out.
That's why we wanted to go out to the RFQ side. And I mean, I worked with Petra early on in this process to kind of give me some early quotes because they'd done work like that.
Yeah.
So they did the original stuff. And then when it got the dollar amount, that's when I was like, we got to go out to RFQ or RFP for this.
Okay.
So that's what we did. We
You're
went
gonna
to,
need something for them to bid on. They're gonna need to know how much needs to be torn up, how deep the new asphalt needs to be, how much
The
space it is.
Yeah.
We're gonna take an added number
Yeah,
per
yeah.
square foot.
and so that's where we would maybe need to hire somebody at that point because it's the Public Works, and correct me if I'm wrong, is 75,000 or more for Public Works going out to bid.
It's, I believe it's two stages. Under 50, you don't have to do anything. 50 to 100, you get 3 bids. This is for construction, it's not design. Construction, 3 bids, and then over 100, it's regular bids, fully advertised.
So could engage somebody to do the design work on our behalf. And if that threshold, we may have to go out to bid for that portion or maybe not, depending on what that quote.
It's gonna be pretty simple design work on it. You just need most likely an engineer, blanking on the name of the engineer. Civil engineer that does site planning and stuff like that. Just have them look at it, probably bore some test holes and look at what needs to be done. And they'll be able to give you some specifications that then the contractor could follow without it be a huge undertaking.
Just see who CM contracted through for the rest of it?
Yeah.
See what they did?
For the,
That makes sense?
So you don't have to do anything if it's under 50.
So that would be the next step, is to get engineering on it so that we have specs to even.
to be able to go out to
Okay.
bid, yes. I think I kind of have a little bit, but no, we don't have them full to the point I feel. But when I started working with Petra, hey, I'm just looking for a quote to figure out what the cost of this would be. That's when they met me over at the site and they started some of that. And then I said, no, I'm not trying to ask you to go to work on this. We're going to go out to bid. But he said that they could do that work. So there's also, I know ESI, McIlvain, any of the big guys could have a civil engineer take a look at that. Okay. With that, I'll stand for questions and then hand it over to Stephanie, who's running through a migraine, so.
I got this. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, esteemed board members.
This is your treasurer report, year-to-date numbers, December 1, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. Revenues for the Boise Center, $9.3 million. Expenses came in at 14.6 right now, so there is a subsidy there of 5.279. As you can see with the district, we brought in revenues year-to-date, $10,644,000. Our expenses were $209,000. So we had revenues minus the expenses 10.4, and we had budgeted for the 9.299. So a little variance there, not bad. As Cody said earlier, September 2024, our tax revenues were at an all-time record for the district. Came in at 1.316. It's about $158,000 over last September. Needless to say, Boise is on the map, and there's been a lot of talk. I know National Geographic just came out this week with Boise, Idaho being one of the top destinations, so a lot to be proud of. This is our transfer report. As you can see, sorry, my eyesight is really bad. We have been managing our capital expenses, so the transfers are down a little bit. I know originally we talked earlier in the year, we were thinking the capital expenses were going to come in at over 300,000 more than what we had budgeted for. Looks like right now, as we're outperforming, it was going to be about 100,000. So, and we still have a couple of projects that the director's staff is shoring up, and so we should have some really good numbers this next month.
Most of them will come under, so we think it'll be inside of 100,000
Yeah.
at this point in time.
Is the Ballard project
Correct.
done?
Complete.
Done.
Yep.
Okay, because that was a pretty big.
Yep, that was a big one. We had the carpet as well. Some of that was straddling on your end because we do a carpet in December. But some of the design work gets done in November, and some of it, then it finishes off from getting installed in December. So that impacts that capital kind of when it straddles the year. That's what we highlighted at the beginning, is saying there's probably about 300,000 that'll hit this year. We just managed to the capital budget all year long and kind of looked at items that, does that really need to be done? Can we push that off? Is that an end of life thing? And things that we felt we could get extended lives on, we managed it appropriately, and now we're down to about 100,000 over, but we'll outperform that. So it should be inside of 100,000.
And this is our investment. This, again, this slide comes directly out of the Clearwater dashboard. And so I know one of the numbers that you guys were interested in seeing previously, we were reporting things a little too in-depth, I guess. So the interest income at for September is $51,867. You can see over on the right side of your screen. Thanks, Cody. This is the cash position. Right now, we're standing at $27,699,000. This restricted funds, we keep the 250,000 in there. The stabilization funds haven't changed to 6 million. So our cash available for projects to date is 21,449,000. Okay. I know you guys are going to be hit with a lot of numbers as we talk about the budget, but do you have any questions?
Well, it's just, I think
Yeah.
we talked about doing the 21 million or whatever. That's not like you, right? We'd have to, and I think this is a question, and I don't know if I ever posed it, but you know, how do you liquidate that, right? You know,
Right.
because I mean, they're in the different terms, right? When they presented, I think it was last month or the month before.
Yeah.
You know, they've got it all in the different buckets.
Right.
So if you needed all 21 million, you'd have to liquidate it. And what is the penalty?
Penalties of those?
Yeah,
So-
there would be penalties and taxes. Yeah.
We
So-
could work with the Clearwater advisors to give us that
Not
indication.
that I want to spend 21 million tomorrow. I'm just saying, you know, that would be
When-
something that we
if-
would need to
yeah.
kind of.
If there was a
Beware of
project
no.
that came up, I think that's a good number, so we'll work with them
Sure.
to make sure that we kind of know
Yeah.
where those liabilities lie from penalties for cashing out a little early.
Early,
So,
yeah. Right?
Really. Sure.
Because I mean, you have to factor that into.
Understandable. Yeah.
Right.
I can get you guys a figure.
But the county, well, you know, it's long ago now, but it seems recent when you're so old as I am. The mark-to-market rules, you know, have them revise the amount of your investments based on, what the interest rates are, et cetera. So they're relatively close in terms of the dollar values and penalties you would pay for selling them, I think. And I would defer to you to the Clearwater books, but
Yeah.
I think
And maybe
that's
they
true.
can just touch upon it next time they're here, just so that we're aware
Sure.
of what that process looks like.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Madam Chair. At the Finance Committee, we talked about the possibility of submitting legislation this year. Basically, to clean up our statute. Our statute, for example, is all in the male pronouns. So we have females now.
No offense taken.
And, additionally, I'd love to change the year end. So I'm thinking of a routine statutory, and Reberger's not here. But did you get a chance to have a conversation with them about that?
No, we did not talk to him. I mean, we identified that that's what it was in the statute, but I have not talked to him about changing the statute. I think at least my recommendation would be that's opening potentially a can of worms a little
Well,
bit.
but I think what we talked about was don't like agencies have sort of, what did you call it? Like an admin?
Well, I think every agency I know of submits statutory changes that are just routine for reasons like I just mentioned. And we were going to check that with Reberger Sullivan.
Can you just ask them about?
Am I,
Because I think it was, what was it, the director of finance or the treasurer?
The treasurer is listed as a he inside the statute.
What prompted it was discussing the fiscal year end and that it was a
Statute.
It is a
Because it's a
statute, and
weird
so as we were
date.
going through the statute, yes, there is some language in there that probably could be cleaned up, but you wouldn't want to open it up to anything much larger than just fixing language. So we can definitely follow up and have some more conversation about that.
it's been my experience that those are routine matters
Sure.
that rarely open a bigger book. Unless you've got a legislator.
The only, I would say that the fiscal end date is tied to our how we exist statute. Correct?
It is, but yeah, I mean, just right, but I would, I think as you made the point in the finance committee meeting, it made sense to talk to the good folks at Sullivan Reberger and get their advice. We can draft technically whatever we need to draft.
I'm just curious why they picked that date to begin with.
And November 30th is the fiscal year end is what, just for Jim's kind of education, what we've talked about is does it need to be November 30th? I mean, I've moved my review period into the middle of July with our team because we slowed down in the summer. So it's like, we're in the middle of holiday season, November 30th, you're coming right off Thanksgiving, headed into December. So it would be advantageous to be able to look at a potential other date.
It's like splitting, you've got Festival of Trees and 2 in 1 year.
Yep.
And none in 1 year, just due to end dates.
You'll see
right?
that this
Yeah.
next year. Yeah.
Right, so,
Well, it dates to, I think, the 1950s, so
yeah, 59.
I'm not certain, well, maybe Phil's got knowledge, but the rest of us.
Adding that to your list, Cody.
Yep.
Thanks.
That's all I have, thank you.
No.
Typically we approve, there's no other questions, I entertain a motion to approve,
So moved.
for the second?
Second.
All those in favor of approval?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Aye. All right, thank you, Tom, more of your wisdom, appreciate it.
So it's my privilege to be here with you today and just to talk about some general.
I want to sit over there, Don, just because you will show up
Camera.
Oh,
on the screen.
I'm familiar with your practices here.
Not, the back of your head isn't lovely, but.
So it's my privilege to be here to talk about some procurement issues. We have set of state procurement rules that apply to public entities, including auditorium districts. In a nutshell, we've got basically two approaches to hiring people for construction or design purposes. Long ago, our legislature realized that having a qualifications-based process to hire architects and engineers and construction managers was a good thing for public entities. And so you can use an RFQ or an RFP when you want to interview companies that might provide architectural, engineering, or other kinds of design services. The construction manager statute also incorporates that. So that's a process where you say, tell us, you issue an RFP or an RFQ, you say, what are your qualifications? What's your experience? And you can ask them at that time what some of their pricing, but you don't use that to select them. Under the statute, you evaluate party, are they the right fit? Are they the right qualifications for your job? And then you start negotiating with them and come to a mutually acceptable contract. If you can't come to an agreement, then you go to the number two party. But that's the process for hiring a construction manager or a design firm. That only applies if it's over $50,000. But that's the process for a qualifications-based selection. When you're hiring just a general contractor, you can't use that. You can use it to hire a construction manager, which is sometimes called the CMGC. There's a special statute for that. That's a statute where you can select what is essentially the general contractor on a qualifications-based process, but then they have to bid the next level. So there's still public bidding. It's just not done at your level. It's done at the subcontractor, supplier, and trade level. That, according to the legislature, still protects the public's money, still allows for projects. That's become a widely accepted method of construction in public entities across Idaho. It allows you to select a contractor you trust. It allows you to select someone who's going to bring their team of people. They still have to get 3 bids, and it's not a full-blown public bid, but if you hired someone like McIlvaine or CM Company, ESI, they could bring 3 possible HVAC contractors, for example, and they have to take the lowest of those 3, but they would select 3 that they've worked with, that they have a good relationship with, and that will do a good job, but they still have to bid it at that level. So schools, districts right now are using CMGC, all sorts of other public entities are. That got us away from a time when public entities had to take a low bid. They often would end up with a contractor that wasn't that qualified. There was no mechanism for disqualifying those bids just based on the quality of their work. You could disqualify them if they didn't give you the right insurance certificate or if they weren't licensed, but you pretty much had to take the low bid. And we had a time period in Idaho where we had a lot of public projects that didn't go well, because in the low bid setting, you get a contractor that will say, I'm going to come in really low and I know how to get change orders after the fact. And so we'd have projects where we'd see change orders in the first month. You know, things, hundreds and hundreds of change orders, trying to make up that margin they lost when they got the work as the low bidder. So in Idaho, we've by and large gotten away from that and replaced it with the CMGC model. If you were going to build this building again, I would be recommending to you to use a CMGC model. You do an RFP for a construction manager who's also going to act as the
I think we did, actually.
GC. Okay. Then the next method is when you're just hiring construction services. It's not architectural. It's not CMGC. That's a hard bid, and that's what I mentioned for your parking lot project. That's going to be one, since it's over the thresholds, you're going to have to go out to bid for that. You're going to need something to bid from. Statutes require you have to have enough plans and specifications so the bidders can give you a price. You want it to be a price that's going to be accurate. You don't want to have them say, you know, if it's 12 inches of asphalt I have to put in, it's going to be this price. If it's 15 inches, it's this price. You want an idea about what you're spending because, you know, in building a complex structure, hard bid is difficult. Building a parking lot, I'm much more comfortable using it for that. And in fact, we used it for many years. We just had a few of these outlier projects and the school districts were the biggest victims actually of some of the predatory practices that some of the contractors dealt with in my experience. So that's in a nutshell, construction and design. Any questions about that? Cody and Mike and I have had a good discussion about these principles. The best thing you can do.
That's why Tom's here, because we had the discussion and then I was like, this should be a good discussion to have with the entire
Yeah.
board, so.
The key to it is, ask us a 15-minute question on the front end. Instead of going down a path thinking you've got it right and then having somebody protest the way you're bidding it. Or get into a contract that now you wish you weren't in. Construction's really an area where you can really have some preventive medicine on the front end. By starting it off right with a decent contract, you can really, it can go much better.
So since we didn't get any RFQs, that ship has kind of sailed for that.
Yeah,
fall,
it kind of
right?
really has. I
Okay.
mean, that's not I wasn't aware that happened. I'm gonna go back and look at the statute again and see if there's a backup, but I don't think there is. If there is, I'll let Cody know.
So now we're into that kind of other process that you were
Yeah.
talking about, where, okay.
And hard bid for a parking lot like that's not a bad thing. It's hard to entice someone like ESI to say, I want to take on a project for a parking lot that's worth $400,000. I'm gonna make maybe $40,000 on it. And I'm competing with, I've got all this other work that's available where I can put my forces that's longer projects, higher dollar value. There's some sense in the construction industry that the sucking sound that Micron's gonna take all the construction resources in this valley is maybe started, but it's not clear when it's gonna end, but there's a tangible feeling of fear that construction prices are gonna, so it's hard to get some, especially a reputable contract like the ones you're talking about, to say, yeah, come and pave my parking lot. It's just kind of a lower on the food chain for these folks.
So to kind of mitigate from, what you mentioned is like they do a low bid and then they do a bunch of change orders. Is there a way to kind of mitigate from that on the front end?
There is, having a good contract and good plans will usually do it. The thing that opens the door to change orders are complex systems. We've had cases where, you guys probably know the difference between the roof and the ceiling in this room. But we've had cases where there was 6 feet of stuff that had to go in there and there's only 4 feet. So you got to redesign the whole thing. And you're just looking at it and saying, you got conduit and duct work and piping coming from 10 different directions and it's not all coordinated. And we didn't realize we needed 6 feet. If we lower it down, our ceiling's only going to be 6 feet. That's the kind of thing that breeds change orders. A simple paving project is really kind of a low risk, even with a hard bid.
So let me ask you, I guess, because we haven't actually voted on it because we're waiting to see numbers on if we're even going to do it or not. So how does that work with that type of process? Can we still go out to get bids and see what the price is going to be before we bring it? Because then we want to bring it before the board and
You
see if we
can.
want to do it or not,
You
right?
can.
Okay,
Comes back and it's 800,000, you may think, well,
right,
let's wait a year.
right.
I know you got pressures from the others that are using that building, recognize all that.
Okay, so it wouldn't bind us into
You're
any
not
sort of
committing to
agreement,
anything.
okay, okay. I guess
Even
was
that's the
question.
process I would do. And then now I do have the money in there just on the budget just to protect it, but it doesn't mean that we need to spend it, or I could adjust and say, adjust it, we could approve the budget today with that taken out, however we want to do it.
No, that's the process we still, go ahead.
Could we get a civil engineer and then just go straight to like a pavement specialties or Knife River, or do we have to go to construction?
You've got to do a bid, whoever responds to it. You're probably going to get paving companies that are going to respond to it.
So can we put it out to them directly and then have the owner's rep work with them, or do we have to do GC and go?
No,
So-
you need a plan, and whoever responds to it, paving company responds to the plans and specs that have been put out to bid, then you're home free.
We can give it straight to, okay.
So we just
Yep.
need to get the plans or the specs
Just
first,
need
like you
to-
want it this deep and it's gonna be this X number of square feet. and
To do a hard bid, you
drainage
got to
and-
be able to quantify.
Yeah, you gotta understand.
And you want to know
that's
the grade, you want to know, are we putting in the lowest level of asphalt or the highest quality of concrete? They need to know what you want
Right,
and what the architect or the design professional is going to specify for accomplishing what your objective.
and I'm assuming they could also go out to the site and space out how many spaces they can get and, right?
So let's talk about other services. There's a number of services that are exempt under the bidding statutes. When you hire professionals, you don't have to put that out to bid. Now, some people do, and that's good practice. When you're hiring personal services, I'm thinking like I've heard the firm Sullivan Reberger mentioned a
My
couple of
question,
times. What they give you is kind of unique to them. They're well-respected lobbyists. You don't want just any person that you're hiring them for their personal connections and their personal success and their reputation. So personal services contracts are exempt from any bidding statutes. Acquiring real estate's exempt. Obtaining insurance is exempt from the bidding statutes.
That was, I think,
We went
the
through,
question
we
had,
went through a
right?
stage with school districts, and then there was a change in the law where the low bidder for the pizza for the lunchroom was always terrible pizza. But they always had to give it to the low bidder, and the kids never ate the pizza, and it was always a losing contract. And then they put it out to bid again, and the same bidder would. So it was just kind of this cycle. And so now those are, if there's something where you need to focus on quality or specific type of system, specific type of software, there's a carve out in the bidding statutes for, and you can use an RFP for those kinds of really narrow, specific things. And I think our school district's client said for pizza that you can actually eat, we're gonna go to Pizza Hut and Domino's and have them be the possible respondents. So there's some exemptions like that.
Sole source is what's next?
That's called sole
Yeah, I was
source.
gonna say that's all falls under sole source.
Yeah, and sole source happens when you've got a fleet of trucks that are one brand and it's only one mechanic that can service that fleet. You can do a sole, now the board has to make certain findings that a sole source is the only solution. But there is a ways to do that.
We did that for the expansion of East when we bought more chairs, because we wanted the chairs to be compatible between the two sides of the building, so we could carry inventory from one end to the other end and not have it mismatch. And also they've got to gang together from a theater standpoint, so.
There's a bunch of different ways our procurement statutes interject and intersect with public-private partnerships. And when we helped with the aquatic center, we took those into consideration. People who built the aquatic center did it according to the public bidding statutes and followed the CMGC statute, and that was the right approach to that, even though it was a public-private partnership.
So Tom, we've got on the agenda, in a little bit, talking about Gary's CVB's contract. And so that again is a unique.
Yeah, that's a pretty unique, there's not too many others that can provide the services that are kind of an exclusive.
DMOs and
agency.
CVBs are kind of the catch for
Yeah.
that type of business or that
Yeah.
type of stop.
That's all gonna fit under the sole source statute for hiring services. There were a couple other reminders you had me.
No, I think that was.
Is that the only other one?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sure, asking some questions.
Okay.
So, Julie, I want to recognize her. I took an intro to public procurement probably 10 years ago. Julie's taken it, so she's going to start taking on a little bit of that, getting to know the procurement side. Basically, what we use it enough, we touch it 2 or 3 times a year when we have big projects, whether it's carpet or something like that. But then we don't touch it the rest of the year, so we're not experts in it. And that's where we use our legal counsel to make sure we're doing things.
So, Madam Chair, may I be excused? I think
Yep.
my usefulness has been fully exhausted.
No, appreciate your knowledge. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Tom.
All right, next on the agenda is executive session. Somebody wants to-
Madam Chair, pursuant to Idaho Code Section 74205(1)(f), to communicate with legal counsel to discuss legal ramifications of and legal opinions for a matter not yet being litigated, but imminently likely to be litigated. Would it be go into executive session, do so by roll call vote.
A roll call.
Ms. McCall?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Erkins?
Yes.
Mr. Rastigar? What did we do this one? I don't have any. This is the marketing. Okay. Marketing. This is just marketing.
There's not really a formal, we just need a motion to approve the release renewal, and then we'll have Kristen sign that.
Well, saying.
Okay. Awesome.
All right, we're back from executive session. On to item C.
Madam Chair, in light of our discussions on our issues with the failing glass, and the company View Glass, I would move that we delegate authority to the executive director to evaluate our legal options as it pertains to the failing glass.
Do I have a second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Right, thank you, Jim.
Madam Chair, may I have you excuse?
Yes, thank you so much.
Jim, be in touch.
All right, on to business item D. Cody, approval of district marketing contracts with Boise.
Okay, slide pulled up here for the visit. See, there we go. Got Carrie Westergaard here today just to help kind of answer any questions that we may want for the executive director from Visit Boise. This is something that we haven't done in the board meeting in the past, but it is a big item as part of the budget. So I think it's important that we go through this as a board with the contract renewal for Visit Boise. And that's our marketing contract for what the DMO and CVB can do for Boise Center. Naturally, the meeting planners will go to DMOs or CVBs first. And I know, just speaking to a meeting planner, it is the kind of a catch, and naturally, we do have a sales effort that we go out, but we need the CVB, we need a DMO marketing arm on behalf of the center. So that's what this contract does. So I'll get into a couple of the metrics of the contract itself. It is into the budget right now, so it'll be approved via the budget if everybody feels that the current terms and conditions are applicable or agreeable. The current fiscal year 24 contract valued at $929,028. There's a proposed update for the 25 contract of 1.198. That I want to draw out. Visit Boise's marketing portion of that contract is just 1.003332 on that piece there. And so I'll get into kind of the goals of the contract on the left side first, and that's what we have as metrics that we have the KPIs we pay attention to from Visit Boise side to make sure we're getting value from the contract. That leads to 2025 contract goals of new revenue value of 1.6 million. That's center specific business, 15,000 room nights, 45 site visits, 100 qualified leads, 7 million in economic impact, and that's center specific as well. They also help on the customer advisory board and organizing and communicating out to the customer advisory board and making sure that we're getting the value out of that, and then participating in sales calls, sales missions are all part of those contract goals and those deliverables.
I guess I just have a point or clarification. You say center specific, but I guess it actually also includes aquatic center.
There
Because
is,
there is some stuff that you guys do for aquatics as well, like helping, I know that you did a website and stuff for them for their meets, right? So
Yes.
that's also included
it's part of the benefit.
in that. Okay, so
Correct.
maybe it's center and Boise Center and.
Those
aquatic
goals
center.
that I'm talking when I say center specific, those are center specific
Okay.
goals. You could probably speak to that
Okay.
better than I could.
The qualified leads include aquatic center as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So that one would be both under the qualified leads, but those other two are center specific goals. The proposed fiscal year 2025 contract changes is a 8% increase from the prior year for the marketing piece of the Visit Boise contract. And so if you take a look at that 929 number and you were to do an 8% increase, it takes you to that just over $1 million number. What we've got also in the budget or in the contract also includes a 10% bonus incentive for anything above 1.6 million. That's about a $10,000 bonus. And then if they get above a 1.7 million, there would be a 15% bonus with a not to exceed on the bonus of 25,000. So if we were to get $200,000 in additional business from them, they'd get 25,000 in that kicker bonus, 10,000 for that additional 100,000, and then 15 approximately for the other. Max compensation for the Visit Boise's marketing, if all bonuses are achieved, is sitting at about 1.028 on that, on the millions. And then the contract does include, and I want to draw this out, additional funds to support a 1-year Visit Boise sponsorship of Glide on the Grove with a do not exceed of 170. And that's how you get to that 1.198 that's in there.
And just for history, you've been contracting with Visit Boise for.
The entire time.
Our entire
How many-
history, yeah.
Yeah.
40 years.
And again,
This
this
is
is
an
All their
ongoing
different
thing.
name changes.
Yeah.
yes.
Well, this is not a new thing. It's just different calling it.
Yep, just different that we're calling it out. It's a big portion of our budget. I think it's important that you guys see from the marketing side. It does live within the marketing budget of the center side. You will see it inside those line accounts as I go through the budget. And I'll identify those as what line that lives in when we get to the budget.
And so just in the contract, you've got aquatics. I just want to make sure, because I know you guys put a lot of.
It is,
stuff in
there's some
there.
aquatic
Okay.
components as per in those contract goals. I just really took the big stuff
Yeah.
over on the left
That's
side, but there's additional goals beyond even that inside the contract. Ally and myself work very closely with Carrie and her team on how that we're progressing throughout the year. Getting frequent updates are also in the contract terms and conditions as well, so.
And I know you mentioned that, you got less this year from the state grant, right?
So yeah, they were able to get additional funds from the grant program in prior year, but this year they're not gonna be able to get to that. It was a 1-year kicker kind of
COVID.
bonus. What was the reason for that
COVID kicker.
additional?
Curious.
Sounds confusing, but last year there was administrative funds that got added back into the coffers, and so everyone was basing business crews off of that. That was a 1-year only thing, so.
Again, as I get into the budget, you're gonna see is we're kind of down on conventions. I tend to think, and again, my predecessor very much thought this way and was kind of trained in this industry this way. When things get a little bit slower, we don't get shy on marketing. We get more a little aggressive and we try to get that business back up. And so I think this is a good value to the center and the district from a contract standpoint. And it's something that I would recommend that we move forward with.
I know it's just, when I do site selection, I just type in CBB, Albuquerque, CBB,
Mhm.
Des Moines, or whatever. I know that you probably get a lot of leads that way too.
Correct. And just the synergy, I would just recognize that the efforts that we have as far as working kind of as one goal. I came back from IMEX earlier this month, working a booth at IMEX, which is suppliers and destinations all getting together. Suppliers and meeting planners getting together, so destinations and meeting planners trying to find homes for their meetings. And just working the booth and seeing that we were all out for Boise at the end of the day. We're trying to see what we can do to get, now naturally, some things fit just in the convention center, so that's where those conversations tend to go, but there's also really great hotel properties and other smaller properties that sometimes those are the better fit for these meetings, and I think that Visit Boise does an outstanding job of representing us and the entire city as a whole, so.
Thanks for all the work that you do. Is there any other comments, questions? I know you got the contract in front of you. You have
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the Visit Boise contract as written.
Do I have a second?
I'll second, Madam Chair, but a comment if you don't
Sure.
mind. I was chatting with Tim about this. I'm sorry he's not here. But if you look at the contract paragraph 8, it deals with the glide on the growth subsidy. You see that we're doing 170,000 to Visit Boise. However, second sentence says the contractor will have no direct involvement in the erection and operation of the facility. So the obvious question is, who's in charge?
It's in there, it's Downtown Boise Association contract. We'll contract and work with Downtown Boise Association, its foundation, the city of Boise, and other interested parties to facilitate those.
Maybe Carrie, you can.
So
speak to
they're
the-
all in charge?
No, Downtown Boise Association would lead the charge, but there is other money that's coming in from sponsors, the city, and others involved in it beyond us.
And Carrie, you may quite speak to your involvement in that or your oversight of it. I
Yeah,
guess.
Madam Chair, it essentially is a sponsorship, like we sponsor a lot of events through, Live After 5, some other things with the Downtown Boise Association. They're in charge of the operations, however, there's lots of partners. City of Boise's Parks and Rec is going to be staffing it. They're just gonna be doing the contract with the contractor like ESI to build it. We're not in charge of building it or staffing it. We're just a sponsor.
But you do have like a committee or Light on the Grove committee or something.
An
that you'll be-
oversight
Yeah.
committee that's going to be looking at, because we are the last to pay. They are getting other sponsorships, and so we hope that that would not be anywhere near the number that it ends up being, but we had to do a do not exceed number.
And so I guess your question of who's in charge
Madam Chair,
carries.
I support the motion and I'm gonna vote for it. I just, last year would, as you know, my office is in the first, in a Wells Fargo building, and I walk back and forth, and the place is not being run anywhere near as good as the one I visited in Caldwell with my grandchildren the night before. So I just stop and say, how's the skate rental work and who's in charge? Try to find somebody.
I can
When
tell-
it's not working, it says, yeah, it's my
Last year
problem.
was solely
I'll fix it."
DBA with sponsors. I can say this would be a little different this year, the way that it's going. So it's gonna be run a little differently.
City's gonna staff it.
Correct. So city staffing to DBA tried to staff it themselves. I think that's what's led to this change is it's a very small entity, DBA is, and so them taking on this big endeavor, I think was a little bit more than they could handle at that point on the staffing side. So I think you probably, you witnessed some of that result. That's the downstream effect of what we're seeing as a community try to get behind it. So-
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other comments or questions? We do have a motion on the table. Did I have a second?
I seconded
You seconded. Okay, thank you. Okay, any more discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Carrie and team. Thank you. On to
Budgets.
the overall budget.
Yes. So in front of you guys here, you have three very large pieces of paper that are going to be what I referenced throughout my presentation here. Starting on top, you should have the income statement from Boise Center. Just before we get going here, I'll just kind of call out what you're looking at on this statement here. On that far left column under column C is our draft budget at a high level with each of these lines kind of collapsed into itself. So you can see at a very high level what we're presenting, the percentages of those. And then over in the column E, you have the 2025 budget, so last year's budget. And then over on the, and you have your variances, then column G. And then over on the right side, you have a year to date through September 30th of what we're actualizing. So it's a good chance for us to just be able to see how we're seeing things and why I'm increasing where I am. I think that there's been an under reporting of revenue or an under budgeted of revenues in the past we've historically done, and I've been part of that, so I'll take ownership for that. But this year, with the guidance of the finance committee, they wanted a much more closer to actual budget, and that's what I put together today. So you're gonna see some big red numbers on that right side variance, and I'm gonna speak to those individually to tell you what's inside those line accounts. But before we get into the statements, I just want to show you and direct you to the slides here, and kind of just some high level information of where I got to and how I got to these numbers. Boise Center for 2024, forecasting to host about 262 events at the end of the year, 72 of those being conventions. We are forecasting a record of about 11.1 million in total revenues. Now the fourth quarter is absolutely, that could go up to 11.2, maybe 11.3 based on what I told you about with October. We're on pace to outperform our gross profit margin goal of 15% and economic impact. We're on pace for 35,000 room nights and forecasting over 42 million in economic impact. So this year's a banner year. We've talked about this a lot, about that compression post-COVID. And this is, I think we're seeing the end of that. Now, what we're seeing is the conventions, and I've highlighted this on the next screen. I go in, I make sure I do a trend forecast on the types of events we've got in the system, and then what we pick up within the year. Right now, as I'm looking at my trends and going in and filling those out, we're at 57 total conventions. That's about 20%, almost 21% down from the prior year where we hit one of our highest. 74 is one of our highest convention months or convention years, 72 right behind it. Now going down to 57. What that does is allows us more local opportunity for local events, which is banquets and meetings for the most part. And so what we do is in prior years, we used to really forecast and have most of our business, 50% of the business was future forecast. We didn't know what it was other than it was kind of we know it's going to actualize and come to fruition. And 50% was on the books at this time when we did budgets. Where I'm at today, and you'll see it on this, is on the event pacing. I have actuals of 2025 in there. This is what we have in the system today is 185 total events. So I don't have to forecast. I'm only forecasting about 30% of the budget, kind of as a pie in the sky, wondering what we're going to get based off of historical pickup and what type of business is out there within that year, within a year. Again, banquets is where I see us picking up our biggest area based on just on historical averages and what we tend to do. And you can go down and look at the bottom of our historicals for each banquet types, and you can kind of see this year 98 would be a pretty high number. But knowing that we don't have those conventions, we have dates available. I think we can drive the boat up on that, or drive the number up on that one there. Meetings is the other number that you're going to see is where we're picking up our biggest number of events, because those
Yeah.
ones do book within the year.
You classify meetings as like a 1-day deal, right?
There could be a meeting as a 2-day deal, but it's local attendees, so it just doesn't have the hotel
Room
nights
nights,
component.
okay.
Room nights is a multi-day event, that's a convention.
And so like the 8 that are forecasted, how is that? How soft is that?
Which one are you asking about?
Forecast, you have 8, or you have 49 actually booked for next year.
In those
You've got
conventions are
8.
stuff that are working on and tentative and that we think we're gonna pick up that are multi-day with room nights. And so that's what gets us to that
So
57. Pretty low. It's a
pretty likely.
reasonable number.
Okay.
What I heard in NIMEX is there is still contracts for 2025 or meeting planners that are looking. We're aggressively working on any business that we could possibly pick up in 2025, and a couple of those are conventions.
It's kind of late to be,
Correct, but there is still potential.
Okay.
So we are seeing that number and that'll fluctuate. If that number doesn't actualize into the 57, I think what we'll see is meetings and banquets will go up even higher because we'll have those dates available. The demand is there. The demand is there. Forecast, again, on the left side, I've just got a couple notes for everybody. And as we go looking at these numbers, based on historical in the year event pickup trend data, I think we've done a much better job at collecting that data, which allowed me to be able to put this together in the way I did. Fiscal year 25, we'll have 2 festival of trees reporting in it. It's because we actualize revenues based on the end date of an event. So this year, the end date will hit December for the festival, but I think the fashion show is that first Monday, December 2nd, somewhere in that range. And that's now means the event's gonna end in December, so we're gonna actualize those revenues into the first part of this upcoming year. And then next year, it ends in November, so we're gonna get 2 festivals in 1 year reporting.
what's an offsite?
Offsite would be like a meetings today. I don't even know, I know we've had one. I think there's only been one.
Technically, it would have been when we like catered offsite for Albertsons.
Albertsons would have been one. If we host something offsite somewhere as like a
That's
sales mission or something.
So rare.
Okay, yeah,
Very rare. Yeah.
okay.
So again, lower conventions means more opportunity for meetings and banquets, as I spoke to. Just getting into here, just to show you kind of how I've come to the numbers. So when you're gonna see some numbers, you're gonna go, well, we're down that many events. How are we getting to this revenue? We continue to revenue manage our space in a very good way. And I've got some numbers all the way back to 2019 where we did 337 events for 22,000 on average per event in revenue. Today, we're doing well above 40,000 in revenue on an average event. So the events are getting bigger. We're drawing in bigger events and they're using more services in-house as well. So that's driving the revenues up on all of those. So what I'm forecasting today, we're looking at probably finishing $11.1 million a year. Then that 10.894 at 247 turns out to a $47,000 or $44,000 average per event. And you can just see there's COVID in the middle there. I've got those in there just to kind of show you.
So the decrease in convention, is that an us problem or is that an industry issue?
Mostly a hotel challenge of the room block problem. We're up against the challenges of getting too many contracts for a block size that back in 2019, we were able to put them in 3 contracts. Now it's taken 6, 7. We've spoke to that in multiple meetings at the board, so.
So it's an us problem?
When I say us problem, we're not
I
a,
mean,
yeah,
yeah,
yes. 2025 forecasting, as you've seen just in these numbers, 247 events, 57 of those convention. Currently forecasting that 10.89. I've got a gross margin goal and I'm comfortable even possibly looking at 16 as we get into these numbers here at a 16%, because as you've seen, we've historically been able to achieve that. Economic impact, we're on pace again for similar room nights. And then forecasting 40 million in economic impact, sorry. But yes, the mega economic impact is a little bit down. What I'm seeing is our fourth quarter is quite a bit softer. In particular, we had 1.3 million in forecast for October of this year. Next year, there's 600,000, so a $700,000 variance for fourth quarter. So I want you guys to be taking that into account as we're looking at these numbers here in front of us. So with that, I'll get into the budget numbers here that you're looking at, and I'll just go down line by line and talk about some highlights that live in each of these numbers and what's driving them. So under the revenue side, which is our top line there on row 31, would be room rental. We're continuing to project a fairly flat room rental. Some of that just fluctuates based on when contracts were signed. We have increased room rates over the past couple of years, but sometimes conventions will contract years prior and they get those rates before those increases. So we're seeing a fairly leveling out even with the less events, but some of that's just due to the increased room rates, and local events that rebook year after year will have those increases into those contracts. Alcohol consumption is in that revenue as well. We actually are trending down on that, and that's an industry-wide thing that I've noted to the board as well. That just, it seems like and it's actually a younger generational thing, that they're not drinking as much at events. So we're kind of just trying to make sure we got that into our forecasting. Again, we could see that outperform, but I've got that in there. And then banquet event food is slightly down, even though they were forecasting 15 less events. More banquets, more local events allows us for doing food and beverage at a higher rate. So the banquet side is actually doing pretty good there. AV rental equipment is based on large repeat events that are growing at Boise Center. We've got some very large, good pieces of business. Cellcore is one of them. And again, those are driving the AV numbers up in a good way. On the expense side, which you're going to see this direct labor, and I wanted to highlight it because there's a big red number there that jumps out to me of 845,000 on that. And my first, when I rolled this up, went, how the heck are we going to say that we're spending that much more? Well, that's why I added this year to date. Year to date through when we still have our two busiest months ahead of us, or at least one of our busiest months ahead of us, we're 225,000 over budget just in direct labor costs. So you take that out of that 845 and now you're sitting there into 600 and some change. Currently, a big portion of that, 180,000 of that is made up in three new positions. Facilities maintenance tech is one of them. Helping with the building side, additional security staff to help out, and I've got some cost savings on that. And then our pastry chef, and I'll point to the savings on that, but our baked good costs have come down significantly, being able to hire that additional staff. So we're spending a little bit more, but as you jump down to that next number down there, the direct costs is where we're having savings. And so it's kind of a little bit of a trade out. What I'd also highlight, and I did this with the finance committee as an exercise, we have PTO accrual we budgeted it the worst. I mean, we recognize the full liability. The chance of everybody in the organization taking all of their PTO and banking it out in the year is pretty much 0 to none. But we need to recognize that liability. So what I did is I started looking at PTO and saying, it's actualizing at this percent, and we're forecasting it at a full amount. How much is that impacting the gross margin? Because as you look down at that 12.51 gross margin number is significantly lower than the 19 we're at, sitting at year to date. When I back out PTO to the number that we actualize it at within the year, at the current percentage is at, it adds 3.5% just to the gross margin, which then takes us up to over 16%. That's much closer. We're having a banner year over here. I think 16% is a number that I feel very reasonable that we're going to hit. And so I just wanted to point to where you're seeing some of those direct labor costs and those direct costs increase or decrease. The largest decrease in the direct costs, which you're seeing under that 421,000, is related to 209,000. We spend 209,000 less than budget this year on equipment rental, AV, because we've purchased the equipment through capital. So the support of the board and our capital plan has allowed us to not have to go out and rent as much of equipment. So that's coming directly out of the direct costs and helping our margins. Couple other things, food costs is another thing that we continue to be over budget on. And if you look over on the right side, we're outperforming this line by 278,000 right now. So we really over budgeted some of our direct costs. And then when you see what's actualizing, that's what's causing that $421,000 variance there. Food costs was about 441,000 less than what we forecasted last year. And that's even with some increases on meat and cheese and grocery that we're seeing as well, added into that. So I was able to sharpen the pencil there, get us down to what we're actually seeing, what we're spending in real life on those. And then again, I mentioned 400,000 in unactualized PTO would bring that gross profit margin to 16%. So feeling pretty good there. Get into the direct, just went through the direct cost line. So I think down to gross profit. Spoke to some of that. I just wanted to speak to, I know that there had been a question about, hey, where was it at 35% and what's those impacts that have happened? Escalators and elevators coming on in East. We had very multi-$100,000 contracts for maintenance agreements for those. Our change in our capital purchasing policy went from everything had to be up to $1,000 before it could be capitalized, and anything over $1,000 could be capitalized. Now is at $5,000. So repairs and maintenance shot up. Prior to East being online, we were able to capitalize a lot of items that we now sit down on our that hit the bottom line. And then the cost of security continues just to be the cost of doing business. We're recouping as much as we can by charging for some of it, but just having a big giant building in the middle of downtown, door checks, all of that, security has become much more of an expense than it was 10 years ago. And then IT related support as well. Everything that connects to the internet, more IT people, more support on that side continues to impact the gross profit margin. So that's some of what's happened from that 35 to where we're about 20 now, 19 today. Looking at it, so. Total employee related expenses. So if you go down these lines, you'll just kind of see I've got some variances in there as well. $40,000 is in some sales training that I've got, or not $40,000, about $12,000 in some sales training that I would like to do. Logistics culture program investment, it's equaling about $40,000 in additional training. And I believe in this thoroughly as a new executive director and making sure our team gets continued education. I just believe in cultivating culture. You got to put a little bit of water in the ground to get those to bloom. And that's that investment there. And so I am increasing some of that, but keeping my margins as they should be. Total marketing and sales expense, the increase is mostly related in that line to the Visit Boise contract increase. So that's that difference of 140,000 in that one. And then as you go down into total general and admin, our largest increase on that actually was we were identifying through GAAP that you can, all of our Office 365 licenses were hitting above the gross profit line. That's actually not the way that those are all used by, it's an admin expense. So we moved those down below the line, and that's what's causing some variances on that one as well. When it comes to utilities expenses, we've actually got some pretty standard increases to the utilities, so nothing alarming on that. On the total building expenses, we are doing a cost increase related to custodial cleaning supplies, and then repairs and maintenance continues to be the two biggest movers that are impacting those margins on that one. Total professional fees, we actually have a slight decrease in costs on that one. Depreciation and amortization, my note there is more assets are aging out. So as we do bollards and put them on the loading dock, they start depreciating. So anytime that we do a big capital purchase, you're going to naturally have a little increase in your depreciations. Those. I thought there would be a question about this total other non-operating revenue is what that one line account down there is kind of, it says total other non-OPER revenue. That's our Grove Plaza contract. So that's our revenue we get from the city to do the Grove Plaza. So just wanting to kind of go through what these items are. If you guys have any questions, happy to answer. Total district transfers is the very bottom down there at an 8.5. 2.35 million of that is capital budget for this year. And I've got a slide to go into that. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward on whatever one of my advancers will do it. There we go. Capital forecasting, these are the biggest items that are hitting it. We've got some very large items that are coming on this year as East continues to age out. These offices right here are due for carpet. As you know, we did the East building, gone to much more neutral. We're going to be doing that and going more neutral into these areas. One of the strategies I've talked to Julie about would be the idea of we're doing a 7-year replacement on carpet everywhere. I would like to look at doing it with going more neutral. It's going to allow us to do carpet in less trafficked areas, maybe every 10 years and save some money on the capital side. So I'm going to take a little different approach than my predecessor to fully replacing all the carpet every 7 years and see if I can get some savings, extend the life in some areas that are just not highly trafficked like this in particular. So
These are squares, right? So you can.
these ones are not. This
Oh,
is a
this
field
one.
carpet. No, this was a field carpet. So we're looking into those options as we replace, but yeah, it's kind of strategic in which ones you use squares and when you're not. Shape of a room, things like that can dictate sometimes whether you're using squares or not. So if you have any questions on any of this, but again, a ceiling upgrade, we've kind of been slowly picking away at the safety concerns or the rigging opportunities where we might be able to drive more revenue by putting more rigging into the ceiling. So that's what that 250,000, it has a little ROI to it as well as just some safety concerns being addressed. And then digital signage is due. That's just a cost. That's a big one. That's about every 3 to 5 years that you need to replace your digital signage. That's when the end of life is for those. And Wi-Fi continues to be a big expense. They always are releasing, and this is something that I'm learning as we go. New phones have Wi-Fi 6 on them now. So you have to make sure your arrays can attach to or connect to Wi-Fi 6 devices. So you always want to stay ahead of the technology that's coming out within the phones. And so we're getting ahead of that. We've got those on a 3 or 4 year rotation to replace switches or even Wi-Fi arrays, and that the switches are a big cost. So that's what's driving that number. Again, forecasting a slight decrease in center transfers. I think a lot of that has to do with just better cash flow. We're collecting more on the front end, so we're not waiting to get paid, and that's helping us in having to transfer as much money because we have more cash sitting there that we can pay our own stuff with, and not needing to kind of go back and forth. And then the Boise Center East lease payments, and 1.7 million of that total transfers is the East, which we're going to get to it after this budget approval here. That is the district, or not the district, the center's budget. Any questions there before I move on? 2025, some sales forecast. All of this, I think the board has heard, but pandemic created compression's over. We are working strategically with our partners to create hotel management. Our potential of a hotel management dashboard came out of the customer advisory board meeting. I think that's something that we need to continue to look at. What that would be a dashboard for meeting planners to say, okay, if I have 6 or 7 hotel contracts, could I have one place in one location? And we help create that solution for them where they dump in all their contract info. And then it has one dashboard that tells them when certain dates are of attrition, where they're at on the pickup, and it helps kind of manage it for them and make it a little simpler. This was something that we had Ken Holtzinger from Freeman identify and said, that's the big one right there from the customer advisory board. And so possibly working with like a Boise Entrepreneur Week or finding somebody at Boise State that might want to take this project on. I think there's an opportunity there to solve some of the challenge that we're having for multiple hotel contracts.
So I guess I just want to make a point, if you want to go back 2 slides. There you go. So I know we talked about this in the finance committee about $50,000 for chairs.
We outperform those. Those are high. And again,
I
you're
know.
seeing, yep, great point.
It was a shocker. And then I think I asked you, what do you do with old equipment? And you said you're able to auction it, right?
Correct.
So that you can potentially recoup.
You gotta go to a
Is this the
public.
executive board?
Yes.
Oh,
And there's these chairs that are also down in our admin boardroom, and these are not a cheap chair. So we do have higher end equipment, and we try to make sure that we're not value engineering as we go through the equipment. But I can tell you the numbers that they put in there, our team naturally does. Pat Rice School of Thought, make sure you have enough money in there for the budget, so that way we don't go over. So you're seeing that happen even on this year where we thought we might be 300,000. We're now sitting at 100,000 over budget in capital. We do really manage our budget on the capital side. We meet monthly. We get in and figure out where we're at on certain projects being completed, which ones can be, hey, is that really an issue right out the gate, or can we get another year of life out of that? So we are, but we're also the type that, and I think you guys know this as you're walking around the building. This is a building that was built in 1990, and most people that walk through it have no idea that it was built in 1990 because we upkeep it very,
But I
very.
think the interesting point was, say a scissor lift or whatever, you get a new one, you can auction the old one off.
Correct.
And that's something I think I've never heard before, is that you can.
You don't
divest.
recoup a ton of your costs, that's what I'll say, because
Right.
it's got to go to a public auction.
But you're not throwing them in trash.
Correct.
Okay.
Or we can donate them to a nonprofit.
Right.
We've done that with Old Carpet to either churches or schools. So you have some options to be able to do some good things with that or recoup a little of your cost. Okay, on that, any questions before I move on to the district budget? I know that I'm keeping you guys long, but
I just want to say, just appreciate your work on this, to chew things up, and feel like for the first time in 12 years, I have the most accurate picture of where we're at and what we're looking at. Instead of this, let's aim high or aim low and shoot high and never really know, where we're gonna at, where we're gonna be, and when we don't hit numbers, lots of excuses and, you guys gotta consider this and that and this other thing, this other disaster that happened. I think this is, it for me and I think for the board, in terms of making informed decisions, it's the best one I've seen in 12 years.
thank you. I can tell you, my team knows I've not shortened any of this process. I probably lived in it, in all honesty. The numbers swim in my head at night, in all honesty. So I can almost speak to them off the back of my hand at this point. So when we get into the district side, so let's go to the next page there. This will get a lot quicker because we just went through the biggest part. One thing that you'll notice is I really sharpened the pencil on the tax revenues, because I remember the look I got from the board chair, she's like, we're flat. And then I'm like, how are we? We've got Hyaldi coming. We have Ironman, we got Far West in June. So I went back and just did some calculations into the night last night, truthfully, and just figured out, I feel that I'm like, this is a pretty, to your point, I'm actualizing and feeling, instead of kind of undershooting, I've got an 11.9 number for tax revenues. Now, some of that's the data that I have from the STR report, but also I had some data that I got from CBB from Visit Boise from Tourism Economics that talked about some of their projected increases within Boise, taking some of those numbers and marrying them up with what I'm seeing in the STR report, plus knowing what's coming in June for Far West, Ironman in July, and Hyaldi in late July, early August. So those are going to be some substantial tax revenues. They were in the high 80% occupancies in 23 when we had Far West back here in June. So with the current ADRs, if they maintain, those are going to be some substantial revenues for the district in those months. That's what's driving that increase, because originally I think I was at about 11.1 when I presented to the finance committee originally. Just started kind of digging in a lot to data and said, I think I'm undershooting this and I don't want to do that. So to Jim's point. That's where that comes from. The interest income is in there at 600,000. That's what we're actualizing. You saw it on the board report today, about 50,000 each month in interest from our cash and investments. Miscellaneous future projects, I've got budgeted money for a potential feasibility study in there, as we've talked about. Doesn't need to be spent if the board chooses not to do it, but at least it's there, so we actualized it if it is. And then consulting, that's the Sullivan Reberger and a couple other little stuff, but Sullivan Reberger is most of that line. Legal, significant dollars budgeted to address UGlass issues, that's what we talked about prior, so that number, you're gonna see a big variance there. And then investment management fees is Clearwater Advisors, they're the ones that take care of our money. Tax commission, admin fees, those are just the collection of our hotel taxes and the tax commission that does the admin side of it to send us what we're collecting. That's that cost there. And then your operating and capital transfers includes the proposed dollars for an aquatics facility parking lot. So that's where I said earlier on, that's in there. Again, it doesn't mean that because it's in there, you guys are saying that we need to go down that road. I will report to you, back to you on the process as we go through it.
It's like the director's fees, $300.
Oh, yes, those are the directors, those are your guys' paychecks, so, yes. The big old paychecks that you guys get, the $5 a month, so.
I'm gonna clarify, that's not $300 per person, that's $300 total.
Yeah. How I come to some of these numbers, and again, what I started to see happen in the STR, I just wanted to point to that. This is on the top bar, you guys have saw it earlier, but they're starting to separate a little bit. The ADRs are going up, occupancies, I don't even have September's numbers in here because I dropped those in the board report. But I actually saw September's number come down on the occupancy and the ADR go up. That's an indicator that things are getting more expensive in Boise. This is the cost of hotel rates. And truthfully, less group rates are gonna drive some of those convention or the tax dollars up as well. Because that's not as many group rate discounts, so. Point to that, this just really drives it home. August of 2024, sitting at an 81.3% occupancy. Last August, we were sitting at a 79.8. There's almost a $4 difference in ADRs. The most important part of that is that room supply. Now, that's over the course of a whole month of rooms, so that's not how many rooms are added into that's if you take all of the hotels in group one, meaning downtown. If you divide that over 30 days, it was actually Carrie that figured this out. It's the 3 additional hotels that are in that. So the additional group, the supply was added into the mix, and the demand came in even higher than it was in August of 23 to where the occupancies were higher. So we dumped in a whole bunch more, so about, what is that, 8,000 rooms, about 7,000 some change. And the demand caught up to it and outperformed it. That's just an indicator of where Boise's at. It's also an indicator why hotels are making the decisions that they are a little bit, so. Additional hotels is in the downtown core. These all opened in 2024, which really helped those tax revenues. 39 rooms to the Avery, 67 to the Sparrow. I don't know what happened to my slide there, but the Hotel Renegade is 122. I know that off the top of my head. And AC Element, there's some numbers floating around of 270, 277. I've seen above 280, but I feel safe with the 271 at this point in time. So. Questions on the district side?
Curious, for consulting, is that just Sullivan and Reberger, or is there other things that go into that number?
There's a few other things that go into that number. It's not just the Sullivan Reberger, I want to say is a 60,000 of it
60, and I think you put 65
to the potential increase.
potential increase, and I think the other you said was Pine Street Group.
Yes, Pine Street Group, I had some money in there for them going forward. And then I could pull it open in my budget and tell you what each individual line, a couple little stuff. STR report, I think, is also in there. Actually, yes, their monthly STR report, which we pay an annual fee for the annual, we get a quarterly report and then we get a monthly report. So all
And
that's
it's not cheap.
no,
can't
it's
remember.
not, a couple $1,000s
Yeah.
for the annual, and then the monthlies also, we pay a monthly fee,
Yeah.
so.
It's making Mike look cheap. I mean, putting those side by side, consulting's a bigger number.
Fair enough, yeah, gotcha. Again, new executive director, I've had to call Mike a lot, so I'm like, yes. Some of that goes on the center side, depends on what the item is. We code it to center, aquatics, or district, so just keep that in mind, because there is a legal line account for the center that I use Mike for as well. So with that, we can go to the next page unless you guys have questions on the district side. Actually, before we go past the district, I want to highlight the number that's on the far right of the screen there. This is a number that I've always wanted to know, to your point, Jim, about kind of where we're at. If you get done paying all your bills from the district side, all of everything that we're done and all the tax revenues I'm forecasting, the district will be able to bank over about $3 million. When I presented to the finance committee, in the draft budget 2, we were about at 2.3. That's that additional tax revenues is that what drove that up. So I just want to highlight that. But anywhere, depending on the year, this year we're spending 2.3 in capital. We normally spend about 1.8. So I would say it's safe for the district to assume 2.5 million to 3.5 million a year that banking right now, based on all of our debt services, everything when we get done paying, that's what you've got. So just keep that
Pending
in mind.
status quo.
What's that?
Pending status quo.
Yes, if we keep operating status quo, yeah, good point. So we'll move on to aquatics unless you guys have any questions on the district side. Okay, aquatics is the easiest one. This is the one that I just want to highlight that currently we don't have any of the credits in there. Right now, the finance team is working with Ryan and Ryan's working with CVB on getting and capturing what those are. Those are all done at the end of the year. So I can go back and do an adjustment to the budget if I'd like.
Calendar year, is
Yes,
that what you go on?
the end of our fiscal year,
Our
yes.
fiscal year.
Yes.
Okay.
And so what I'll do is I want to be trying to get an actual number instead of coming in and just throwing something in there. I'm going to find out what there is, and then I'm going to come back and do an adjustment to this budget with those discounts in there later at a later date. What I would recommend, and I think we both talked, and I know we both talked about this, is the idea of if we get into a situation where we're 6 months into the year and the fourth quarter is looking like this fourth quarter, which I don't think it will, because we're not going to have those conventions just coming in short-term booking, at least the big ones or the biggest events, they tend to have calendar dates well out in advance. But if for some reason the fourth quarter is, because it's our furthest out, where we tend to look out ahead, it's where we have to kind of do some forecasting and making some assumptions. But if that starts to come to fruition where we start seeing it, I could absolutely do a 6 month at June, come out and do an adjustment to the fourth quarter budget and bump our revenues up, our forecasted revenues up. It's up to the board. I can tell you that we're in the numbers now, and I'm very, very knowledgeable about where things are going and where things are coming, so.
So really, this is just rent minus depreciation.
Correct.
Right.
Yep. So pretty straightforward there, and again, that additional 450 to total transfers is if we do the parking lot. So the number would jump up if we don't need that.
Lots of buckets.
Lots of buckets. Questions from the board?
Questions about money,
Sorry.
bidding? Jody and I met a couple times as finance committee, so we've taken a look at this. We've had a lot of discussion, so, you know, I feel pretty comfortable with the budget. You probably feel pretty comfortable with the budget, so spent some time really looking at it. I know Cody and his team have spent some time on it, so like you said, I think it's about as accurate as you think.
This is gonna give us a better tool to manage if we're over. I can justify why we're over, so I just expect those types of comments as I go through next year, because there will be some lines that I probably, in the past, we've just been able to really knock out of the park because of the way that we budgeted. I was guilty of it, part of that, so I'm not gonna blame or point fingers.
Madam Chair, one of the things that impressed me is not only is Cody new, but Stephanie is new and Julie. So we have smart people asking smart questions. It's a good team effort, I think.
I wouldn't trade this team for anyone, honestly, the whole team. I mean that through heart, just they're good employees and doing the right thing, and they're dedicated to the center and what we're doing, and they're bought in. That's why culture is so important here to me, so.
I know this is a months-long process, so thanks to you and the team for sharpening your pencils and spending the sleepless nights thinking about numbers.
Start counting sheep again instead of tax revenues.
Any other questions, budget-wise, comments? With that, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Right. Go forth and conquer, right? Last piece of business, Stephanie? lease
Last
renewal.
piece of business is just the East lease renewal. Just approved the 2025 budget, so there is funds that are appropriated for that lease. And so we just need to get a motion, get a second, get it approved, so that way we can have a signature and the information forwarded over to the CCDC, yeah.
And this is the standard lease.
This is just a
renewal,
formality for the
formality.
lease renewal.
Move to approve.
Do you have a second?
Second.
Right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. And is that, do you have something I need to sign for that? Or is that
You
later?
and Anna are going to have a discussion as to whether or not you want to wait and sign it after
You
we've
can,
made
historically,
updates.
you've come back and signed it, but if you
Come
wanted to
back,
wait a
so.
minute while we updated the document, you could go downstairs and sign it.
Entirely
I don't
up
know
to
what your schedule looks like, but
Yeah.
I said those options are on the table. In the past, it looked like you came back like 4 days later and signed it.
Okay,
to you. I can get it prepared. I can scurry out of here. and
Okay,
then
yeah, yeah,
just
why don't we
come
just do
down.
that?
Okay.
Yeah. All right, seeing no other business for the board, the meeting's adjourned.
Great.